All right, welcome to the conversation. Now we're going to talk to one of the best journalists in the country, David Sirota. He's the founder of the Daily Poster and one of only a handful of journalists that actually report facts in this country. He's now also involved in the podcast, The Meltdown or Meltdown. That's super important. we're going to talk about why in a second. But first, David, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So on Monday, Representative Jayapal went on TV to say that she was agreeing to Manchin's demands, which is to vote on the bipartisan infrastructure bill before they vote on the Build Back Better bill, which is the bigger reconciliation bill that progressives wanted. That appears to be a complete surrender. Am I missing anything?
It sure seems like a surrender. I would say that we have to see the final details of the reconciliation bill and whether they even hold. But certainly, look, the House progressives, the thing that they did that I think very few people focused on, that was the key tell, and that we at the Daily Poster identified back in August, was they kept saying no climate, no deal. They kept saying they were going to withhold their vote on the infrastructure bill until there was a reconciliation bill that was linked to it and passed with it. But they never made clear what their demands of the reconciliation bill were. They kept using terms like robust, which are fungible terms. So in other words, what they did was they kept saying essentially to the Democratic leadership, you can cut and gut the reconciliation bill as much as you want, because we're not actually saying what we believe is a non-negotiable, must-pass set of demands that need to be in that reconciliation bill, which ultimately is exactly what ended up happening. The Democratic leadership, at the behest of Manchin, Sinema, and the like, kept hacking away at that reconciliation bill because the House progressives kept saying, we're only going to hold out to keep the infrastructure bill and the reconciliation bill linked, but we're not going to actually say what we would withhold our votes for if things are taken out of the reconciliation bill. They never made specific demands. So now we're at a situation in which the reconciliation bill has been gutted, and the House progressives look like they are completely capitulating and surrendering.
So this is going to relate to your podcast in a minute. It's your podcast is super important, so I want to get to it. But one last thing here. Look, given that they said no climate, no deal, and there was no climate, there was a deal, or at least at best half a climate. Given that that they said that they would not vote on the first bill without the second bill, and now it looks like they're going to do that. Given that they didn't make any concrete demands as you just outlined. Given that they got clowned on $15 minimum wage, and now they've lost on intensely popular provisions like paid family leave and lowering drug prices. I mean, you almost can't lose on lowering drug prices. You'd have to not try to lose on lowering drug. It's got a 90% approval rating. If you can't win on that, isn't it an inescapable conclusion that Representative Jayapal is not a good leader for progressives?
Look, I don't like to specify or I like to call people out when they are being corrupt. I like to follow the money. That's what the Daily Poster does. And I'm not trying to avoid your question. What I'm trying to say is that the facts that you've laid out are certainly the facts. I think we have to acknowledge that there is an asymmetry at play in Congress right now. And it's something that isn't talked about very much, but we need to talk about it, which is to say that the House progressives, if you believe they are operating in good faith, and I want to hold that out as a big if, because that is obviously, as you suggest, is not clear. But this asymmetry is, if you believe they're operating in good faith, they are trying to, again, if they're operating in good faith, they're trying to protect the good parts of whatever makes it into a final bill. And the other side, this is the asymmetry, the other side, the Manchins and the Sinemas, they and their donors, and let's be clear, their donors are calling the shots. They would be happy for all of it to go away, for nothing to pass at all. So the difficulty is always, where do you draw the line on what is a sellout and what is progressives trying to protect the last crumbs that could possibly be in a final bill? And so that's all a long way of saying this. I agree with you that at this point, the amount of things that have been cut out of this bill is so egregious, is so offensive, is so politically ridiculous that there is a strong argument to make that not standing up and not withholding their votes for a better bill is a complete surrender, is completely unacceptable, and is completely outrageous.
Yeah, and by the way, I just want to be clear. I actually don't question their good faith. I question their planning. I question their strategy. I question their
backbone.
I was going to say resolved, just as you were saying that. And by the way, that is what they take greatest offense at. How dare you say that? Well, I dare it because it's obvious. It couldn't be any more obvious. And so the way you show that we're wrong, which we both, David and I, would love to be wrong. Isn't that a funny situation, right? You show it in your votes. You don't show it in your tweets. You show it in your votes. And right now, as things stand today, it looks like it's a complete cave-in. Okay, so.
But again, I just want to add that this is a game of chicken. I am sure that they are trying to figure out what do we have to vote for to preserve the good parts of the bill, because the other side doesn't care if there is nothing good.
No, I know, David. I'm going to cut you off.
What they've cut out is big enough to say, okay, the entire bill we've been embarrassed. The entire bill has been gutted, and now is the time to take a stand.
No, besides which, look, it's not just about this bill. If you say you're going to do something and you don't do it, and they were very clear about the order of the voting, that means you have no credibility left. You have no leverage left. That means we're going to get nothing going forward because they're going to think your position is a joke. And it is, because we have a very, very poor leader. And we have everybody else willing to follow that leader because they think offending her is a bigger crime, and offending people in Washington, and offending Jake Tapper, and offending Nancy Pelosi is a bigger crime than not actually delivering for their voters. And so if you tell me that there was no way we could win on paid family leave, I gotta be honest with you, you're a terrible legislator. If you say there was no way we could win on lowering drug prices when 88% of the country agrees with you, then you're a terrible politician. So these are inescapable facts, whether we say them out loud or we don't, it doesn't matter. They're just as inescapable.
Yeah, and Cenk, the tell here is, and we wrote this at the Daily Poster a couple weeks ago, call their bluff. If you're serious about passing these things, okay, put a bill on the floor of the House, put a bill on the floor of the Senate with all of the good things in it. And at minimum, at the absolute minimum, force Manchin, force Sinema, force the conservative corporate Democrats to affirmatively offer an amendment to strip out all of the good things of this bill. No, they haven't even done that.
Now, David, when they don't do that, it kind of, then I gotta say, I question their resolve 1,000 times over. Why won't you embarrass the corporate Democrats? Why won't you say, hey, 9 out of 10 Americans want this? Wait, why are you for higher drug prices? Why are you for higher drug prices? It's because you're donors, right? They began to say it, Jamal Bowman, AOC, and others began to say it on TV, but then they quickly retreated. Do not retreat. We didn't send you to retreat. We sent you to fight for a strategic reason. And I actually, look, even like Jayapal, I have no bad feelings about her at all. A couple times I've met her, she's been a perfectly lovely person. I feel bad saying it. I don't want to say it, but my obligation is to actually do the news. I've never seen her call a bluff. I've never seen her stand her ground. All she's ever done is surrender. So I'm sick of it. All right, for God's sake, we got to go to your podcast before we run out of time. You did it with amazing folks, Audible and Alex Gibney's Jigsaw Production. So it's amazing, and it actually kind of relates to this. So tell us how it relates to this.
Sure, it directly relates to this. There is a myth that's going on that's taken hold among Democrats in Congress and in the corporate media, not surprisingly, which is that Democrats have to reduce aid to workers. They have to pare back their own promised agenda. They have to be quote unquote moderate. They have to serve their corporate donors in order to be able to best compete in the upcoming midterm elections. If that feels familiar, that's because it is familiar. That's exactly what happened in 2009 and 2010, when Democrats controlled Congress with even bigger majorities, with a president who had an even bigger mandate, and they got into power, and they refused to have a battle with a handful of conservative corporate Democrats. They pared back their stimulus bill. They watered down their Wall Street reform bill. They essentially did a giant bailout for those at the top, a handful of financial institutions. They didn't use their power to redirect that bailout into help for people who were being thrown out of their homes. And what happened? Well, 2 years after the 2008 election, the Democrats got shellacked in the midterm elections. And here's the thing and that's what The Meltdown, the podcast, is really about. It traces that. It traces that failure to the conditions that were created for Donald Trump's ascent. And you don't have to believe me on that, okay? Steve Bannon, Donald Trump's consigliere, said the legacy of the financial crisis is Donald Trump. And what he meant by that is, at least in my view, is that Democrats' failure to use that opportunity to really deliver for the working class of this country in the way that FDR used the Great Depression to deliver for the working class of this country. The Democrats' failure to do that helped create the backlash conditions for Donald Trump. And the fear is, and here's what really everybody should be afraid of, is that the fear is that if Democrats repeat that history, as they seem intent on doing right now, they will recreate that history now for another Trump presidency or something even worse.
So look, we're already out of time, but I want to tell the audience, you got to listen to Meltdown, because it's basically, it's almost like a CSI or an autopsy of what happened in that crime back in 2008. And how people got misdirected, both the right wing and Democrats, and how if you don't learn those lessons, you're bound to repeat it. And we're in the middle of repeating it right now. Right now, David's absolutely right about what he said in terms of how that relates to this. And by the way, there's a reason why David Sirota is one of the most hated men in Washington. It's because he actually says things that are true. Barack Obama handed everything to the banks. Okay, he did. It's facts. There's no question about it. And you should ask yourself, why is Sirota telling you that? Why isn't the rest of the press keeping that from you? Look at the facts, see if you can out-Google them, okay? See if you can find things that aren't true in there. You won't be able to. And that's why whenever they attack you, David, the mainstream press does, they never say you're wrong. They never say that. They always say you're not civil, you're all these different adjectives that they attach to you,
right?
Impolite, etc. But they never attach the adjective incorrect, because you're not. So,
right. And again, it's relevant to right now. And I want to make one last point very quickly, which is that we need to understand the connection between economic policy and democracy. If the Democrats continue to get elected, promising things, promising help to workers, promising help to families, and then they get into power, and they use that power to side with their corporate donors and to betray their campaign promises. And then they go into the next election and say, you have to at least elect us to protect democracy. Lots of voters will inevitably say, I just used democracy to elect you. You promised me things you didn't deliver. Why should I care about democracy? That is ultimately one of the potential products of this kind of behavior, is that people lose faith in the system, they lose faith in democracy.
That's 100% right, but they're a good fail-safe option when that happens, David. The politicians will be to blame me and you, and then they'll think the problem is solved. If you would just stop telling people things that are true, I bet they don't figure it out. Well, history shows you they figure it out with or without us. All right, everybody check out Meltdown, but also read the Daily Poster. Really, some of the best journalism in America, and it's not even close. All right, thank you, David.
Cenk, thanks so much.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.